All right, so a couple things to download today. So go ahead and download this worklog.accdb. That's a database, an Access database. And actually, that's the only thing to download. And we're going to be starting with a brand new workbook. So open up Excel again. Don't need to update, Alt F11. So I've got my code open here. I'm going to go ahead and insert a module. And then over on our blog, let's follow the dbconnect2.txt link and just copy this whole thing and let's put it in to your module. If you've got an option explicit at the top, you'll want to make sure that you don't have two option explicits. So one will be enough. So just kind of brought that code in as the place to start for today. So we've got some of the same stuff that we dealt with when we were together on Monday. So kind of same thing, we're declaring a connection. Oh, by the way, for us to be able to declare this connection, what do we have to do? It should be in the notes here, I should have put it. But what do we have to do here? This object is not natively available. In fact, if I try to run my Acme subrunner, which is going to call this procedure, I'll get an error message, user defined type not defined. What is this? It says, I have no idea what you're talking about here. What do we have to do? Do you remember? We've got to add a reference to this. So I'll stop the code from running altogether. I'm going to choose Tools, References, and I got to go find the Microsoft ADODB Active Data Object, Microsoft ActiveX Data Objects, and I'll do 6.1. So when we're using this approach to accessing a database, once you've put that reference into this workbook, if you copy that workbook somewhere else, the reference goes with it, no problem. But if you just kind of bring in code for a brand new workbook the way we did, you've got to make sure you remember to put in that reference. Okay, so we have the same things here, but we just don't have there's no record set. So we're saying we've got a connection string. That's in terms of what we did on Monday. Connection, the CS will be a string that's going to allow us to get connected onto the database. And then the SQL will be the query that we're going to execute. Now, typically when we think of a query in the canonical sense, a query is a question. I mean, just in English language, you say, I have a query, it means you've got a question. But we still use the term query for any structured query language statement. So in this case, it's going to be an insert statement. We're going to be inserting data into the database, but we'll still call it a query kind of commonly, even though I think it's probably wrong to do so. So we've got structured query language, which is going to hold our insert statement here. And then we'll go ahead and do this. Now, this is kind of built up to get us executing this query and having it work correctly, but we're going to have to do some customization to it. Oh, here's the reference to making sure you've got your objects connected here. Now, I think what this is going to do is this is going to connect on to Colonial Bakehouse. I didn't even test this code before class. I hope it works. This should just bring in a bunch of data for us to work on. So we're getting some information about applicants, and we're going to be putting it onto which sheet? Active sheet. I'm going to just put it on the active sheet. So I'm just going to run this one and just be another example for us actually running code that connects to a database, but it's not. Oh, shoot, we might be in a little bit of trouble here, but it's not. Well, number one, it's not working. Let's read that error again. vSer server cannot open database VBA requested by the login. The login failed. Stand by just 1 second and let me check. I wonder why it's blocking. I wonder if that's why it's blocking. It shouldn't be blocking it there. Okay, I should be able to get at the same database through Excel. Ultimately, we just need to get some data here. So if we don't get this going straight away, we'll just copy some data from somewhere else. fact, let's just do this. Let's just open the workbook that we had last time. We had some data there. I don't remember what that data was, but let's just bring in the data from the workbook that we did on Monday. Database read. So if you've got that on your machine, we're just going to literally copy this block of data over. It doesn't matter what the data is that we have here, we just need to have some data. Of course, if you don't have access to that because you didn't follow the example, you can pick it up from class marked the 14th importing data. Okay, so the example then that we're working today is this record edit. Here's the idea, is that I'm going to actually set up VBA to keep track of the changes that I make to the workbook. So in fact, to see this, kind of where we're headed, let's go ahead and set up the event properties here. Now, we learned in working with user forms that we can make code execute when a particular object receives a particular event, like this event-driven programming paradigm. That's not limited just to user forms. You can actually have your code respond to events happening in the worksheet and the workbook as well. So let's take a look at an example. We haven't used these yet ever before. Let me go ahead and zoom in on these. So we've kind of seen these object things here, but we've never used them before. We've always worked in modules or forms. But I'm going to come and select one of these. I'm going to do this workbook. So if I double click this workbook, that will actually open up a module. When we're doing a user form, the modules in the user form, they're the ones that are ready to respond to events. Well, that's the same thing for the modules that are here in the workbook. So I've got a module that's for the whole workbook level, and then I've got modules for the individual worksheets. If I have something that's going to be responding to actions just happening on that worksheet, I can put it directly onto a particular worksheet. But now here on the module, I don't have a whole lot of options in this dropdown. It can just be like regular procedures, or I can say, oh, this is going to be I want to see like the events for the workbook. So I'll click workbook here, and it's going to default to workbook open. But there's a lot of different events that I can respond to. So this is code that's going to execute when the workbook opens. So this would be really annoying, but we'll just put a message box every time the workbook opens. Hey, this is my workbook, be nice. I'm going to save that. I'm going to save the workbook. I just realized I'm on the wrong one. I better close out of the workbook. Okay, so let me get to workbook for this module. I'll paste that back in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save and close this workbook, and that will, let's see, downloads, XLSM. Because the code is it's going to execute when the workbook receives the open event. And that happens when the workbook first opens. So I'll close that workbook now, open it up again. As soon as I enable macros, it will run that code and do whatever that code says to do. So the idea here, what we're going to do here is we're going to say, all right, anytime the user makes a change to a cell, to a single cell, I want to record the fact that they changed the cell. I want to log that into the database. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up that Access database so I can get a look at that and see where we're going to be putting this data. should be able to go to my downloads and open up this worklog.accdb. And I've got applicant. Oh, that's where I could have pulled the data from here. That's all right, we've got data now. And I've got work log here. So this work log is blank, but the idea is we'll have a time that it happens. This looks like it's going to be generated by the database itself, but we're going to record the username of the logged in user, the workbook they're working on, the sheet that they're on, the address that they put in, or the address of the cell that they're editing, the formula they put in, and the value that's being displayed. So the idea here is to say, hey, the very fact that someone made a change to this workbook is going to cause us now to run an insert statement that will put data into this database. We're keeping track of all the changes, like the change history of this workbook. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that open. And let's just go ahead and test our code and see if this record edit should, because it looks like we've got this hard coded, we're going to need to change this so that it actually reads the information that we're after. But if I call this procedure and pass it a worksheet and a range, then it should go through and record this, because it looks like we're getting connected onto that driver. I think what we're going to see, that's SQL Server. Let's go ahead and configure this to work on the Access database instead of the SQL Server database. So you can see I've given you two connection strings here. One's to connect to SQL Server, one's for Access. Let's come down and do the Access one. You can see that it's looking for that worklog.accdb just in the same path as the workbook. So the source for this connection is going to be wherever my workbook is, but then looking for this database file named worklog. We'll open that connection. We're then going to have a structured query language statement that's going to do some inserting, hard-coded at this point. We're going to print that out. We'll execute the query and close the connection. But that should put a record into that database. And I've already got a kind of this debugging runner here to just call this particular sub-procedure. So it looks like that ran without error. It displayed it here. I'll come back to my Access database, and it doesn't show that new record until I do something to cause it to refresh. So I'll bring that work log open, and we'll see that it wrote that record into the database. Okay, so the basics then here of just getting a query to insert a record into the database is here. We've got to change this so that it puts the data that we're after, because it's right now everything's hard coded. But let's just do this so we can see that that happens every time we call this. So what I want to do is I want to find an appropriate object and event to automatically send the information that we're after every time a change gets made. So to do that, I'm going to come again back to my workbook. And instead of the open event, let's just see what other events I have to choose from. So, oh, new sheet. Every time a new sheet gets made, I can make that fire some code. When a new chart gets made, open we already have. Let's see, sheet change. I think sheet change is the one that we're going to want, because anytime a sheet changes, there's a change on the sheet, we want that to fire some code. So I'm going to come here and do sheet change, and that's going to give me another event sub-procedure. Now, this one's a little different than open. Open just says, hey, this code's going to run. But now when a sheet changes, and remember, this is kind of made at the workbook level, so we don't even know which worksheet is being changed. So fortunately, when this event gets called, or when this procedure gets called, it's going to send us a variable that's going to be a worksheet. It's called SH here, but this is a reference to the worksheet that's being changed. And it's going to send us one called target that's going to be the range that's being changed. So let me just do this to get us started. Let's just put a debug.print. And let's print sh.name, which would be the name of the workbook, and target.address. Okay, so now if that is correct, every time I get a change on this worksheet, it should print That should print up here to the immediate window. So let me change this, just like I'll delete this value. And it wrote that out here. It was kind of in the middle of that statement, so that wasn't very helpful. Come back and make another one. I'll put Alan here. And so that says sheet 1, cell H5 just got changed. Sheet 1, H5, yeah, that's the one. So we can say, all right, we just want this code to execute. Now, we're gonna have a little bit of a problem here because what if someone deletes several rows at a time? That's gonna be sheet 1, and we just changed this range. And that's gonna be more complex than we're after. So I think I only wanna deal with, for this example, I only wanna deal with single cell changes. So let me just put an if statement around here. If target, and target's a range, so I got access to whatever range properties I have. So if target dot cells dot count is equal to 1, then I want to do whatever it is I'm doing. In this case, just printing the immediate window for now. Okay, so now if I do some multi-cell change, did my event fire in this case? The event still fired. I still got and ran this code, but I didn't meet this condition. So what was my target cell count? I don't know. It was, looks like 5 cells. So this still executed. It just didn't execute this line because it's in the if statement that prevented it. So if I was to change just to one of them, then we'll see that change. We'll see that execute. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now what I want to do is, instead of just doing a debug.print, I want to call that procedure that's going to write data into our database. So that's in module 1. And you can see that this is, that's the reason that this thing is set up, this record edit is set up to take a worksheet and a target, so we can just pass those same parameters from the call to the event subprocedure into this one. So I'm just going to call record edit. Don't really want to debug print that. I just want to call record edit. I'm going to pass it the sheet and the target. So I'm actually passing through the sheet, whatever sheet object they pass to us, we're passing it along. Whatever target range on that sheet they pass to us, we're passing it along as well. So now changing a cell on this worksheet or anywhere in this workbook should cause my access database to update. And it would be nice if the access actually was capable enough to show those happen without having to refresh. But let me just go ahead and delete a cell here. Open up that work log again. We've got 2 records here now. Make another change, refresh. And that seems like that should have done it. Why didn't it do it? We come back here and put a debug.print here. Put another one here that says I'm in the if statement. Then I want another one here that says I'm at this location. Okay, so I've got 3 statements that I'm expecting to have happen. Oh, it looks like it must have gotten there because it actually printed this. Interesting. Make another change. Clear out all of this, make another change. In the if, I'm at record edit, I'm printing the query. And they're coming in. That really should not have taken that long to have those come in. Let's just try one more. It's supposed to be quick. Got 6 records showing. Close that, open it again. I've got 7. Apparently my refresh all wasn't doing it. Maybe that's the only problem that I had there. Let's edit another one. Close this, open it again. Still got 7. And now the 8th one's there. Not sure why it's taking a while for that to come through, but it's triggering the code, it's pushing it into the database. Okay, with everything we've done so far, just show me on a scale of 0 to 5 how comfortable you are with what we've seen. 3s, 5s, 4, and 3s, okay. Yeah, this idea of having your code respond to changes in the workbook, it's going to add a lot of power to you, and it's kind of remarkable the things you can do. Okay, so now our task is going to be, and in fact, this is the task for the database project. So in that database project, you're going to have to process through a bunch of Excel files. You'll open up one at a time. You'll have to have some kind of loops that go through and find the data and formulate a structured query language statement. And then use that structured query language insert statement to push the data into the database. And this, this setup here is just what you need. You'll have to change the name of the database and so forth, but it's asking the same thing. Workbook's going to have a particular name, be located in the same path as the database will have a particular name located in the same path as the workbook. So what we're doing here is that every time we run this, we're running just one insert statement. The difference is that when in the project, when you run the code, it's going to kind of read the whole worksheet, and it's going to do dozens of insert statements for that one worksheet. But the database part, we'll take a look at how to do right now. So what I could do is I could say, all right, instead of having this SQL statement, this structured query language statement kind of all built out, we could just kind of get it a little bit and kind of add a little bit on at a time. So we could get right up to this point where the username goes in, and then we could bring in the username and then concatenate on the rest of this. Or we could essentially parameterize this string. That is, go ahead and have it built out, the whole thing built out, but let's look for things to change in here. And that's the way I'm going to do it. So let's do this. Let's just work on the username first. So I'm going to replace kworthen with just, and remember, this is just some string. There's no magic here. This is just characters. I'm going to put in a couple of angle brackets, like greater than, less than sign, and I'm going to put in username. So now the idea is before if I was to execute this, it would actually write angle bracket, username, angle bracket into the database. I think I just ran that. Go ahead and close this, open it up again. And there it actually wrote, it wrote that, just the characters here. I haven't done anything magical yet. And so now sometime between where I set this up and when I execute this, I'm going to want to replace this, do some string manipulation on this and actually replace it with who the actual username is. Well, it turns out we can ask who the current username is. Just come up to my immediate window. You can just say application.username. And so that will just say, hey, whoever's currently using the system. So here's what I'm going to do is that between where I set up the parameterized query and when I execute it, I'm just going to do a replace statement. I'm going to say my SQL query equals, what's it going to be? Well, I'm going to call the replace function. And I'm going to look for my tag. And I'm going to replace it with whoever is currently logged in. Okay, so now if I run this, REPLACE. Oh, thank you, yes. I'm missing a parameter. So replace says, look at this string, look for this string, every occurrence of that string, and replace it with whatever you have here. And then there's actually some other parameters that I can set here. So the next one is where to start. So I could say start at the first character. So this would say, you know what, don't replace it in the first part of this string. You know, don't start replacing until after the 20th character or something. Then I can also indicate how many I want. If I put in -1 here, that'll be all of, that means all of them. And then I can say this instance about a comparison, do I want it to be case sensitive, which would be a binary compare, or text compare would be, I'm sorry, yeah, text compare would be case insensitive. So if I found this in uppercase or lowercase, it would be okay. So it turns out, you know, we want all the defaults here for this example, so I'm not going to add those last parameters. All right, so I should be able to run that. And that should be here in the database now. So now we've entered that with my real username. Whew. Okay, so that's it. I mean, the next thing is just more of the same. So here's the name of the workbook. I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to have you do the next two as a class exercise. So I'm going to put a parameter on this. I'm going to call this WB name. I will look for WB name. Now this is a little bit interesting. There's a couple ways that I can get the workbook. How should I go about getting the workbook? Could be the name of this workbook.name. Or I could ask it from the worksheet or from the sheet variable that gets plugged in. Let's just go ahead and do that because it'll teach us something that we haven't done yet. I'm going to put a breakpoint right here, and then I'm going to run my code. And so I should be able to ask what sh.name is, and that tells me it's sheet 1. But I can also ask for the parent, sh parent.name, and that will be the name of the workbook. The parent of the worksheet is the workbook. So I can use that expression down here in my replace. So I'm going to now look in my query where it says WB name, and I'm going to replace it with the name of the worksheet, whatever got passed in here. So the interesting thing here is that the call to this now, whatever calls it, it could be a different workbook that's making the call, and we would get that workbook. It's not limited to just, you know, the change happens somewhere else. It could be here. That's good. I'll go ahead and take off my breakpoint and run that out. And so we should have the real name of the workbook now in my most recent one. I guess which was, yeah, there it is. So we've got, now we've got that. All right. So why don't you go ahead and change the name of the worksheet so that you can actually see that it's working. So I'm going to just come here and call this customers. And let's take about 4 minutes. And I want you to do the next 2 steps. That is, convert this to deal properly with the worksheet name as well as the cell name. Then we're going to do some things a little bit different with the last 2. So we'll start a 4-minute timer and he can have at it. Okay, so the one thing that we, for the recording, you missed this because I had the recording paused. But you've got to make sure that when you're here and you say this workbook dot path, that you get something that starts with a drive letter. So this is going to work because it's on my local machine. But if I've got this saved like on a OneDrive path, this is going to be https:// It's going to start with something like that. And VBA just doesn't know what to do with this path. So this has got to be so that you get a regular drive letter : at the beginning of your path. Okay, so if you need help on that, TAs can help you, or I can give you a hand helping you find the place that's going to work out. Okay, so it shouldn't be too bad. This should be the sheet name. So I'll probably just call that SH name. This one's going to be the address, that in capitals. So we'll be doing the sheet name, address. Now, we're getting passed into us, we're getting SH passed to us as a worksheet. So this is a reference to a real worksheet. So I should be able to ask for the name property of that worksheet. So that'll just be sh.name. And then my address is coming in as a target variable as a range. So I should just be able to make that say target.range. And so I should have replaced those values there. Let me give that a go. Oh, sorry, it's not .range, it's .address. It is, the target is a range. Looks like that ran. Find that database. Refresh the records. And so now I've got, oh, I was expecting to see my new sheet name. Did I change the sheet name? Oh, I haven't actually changed it yet. So, but we do see that I've got a different cell besides A1. I'm not so sure I'm thrilled about these $signs. That's just what happens when you ask for the address. It puts the $signs in it. Yep. I had no idea. I was going to get rid of the $signs with a replace statement. Absolute row, absolute column. I have been working with VBA since 1995. That's a long time. It's pretty bad that I never noticed that, ever. So I can say, wow, I just can say I don't have to, I don't want an absolute row, and I don't want an absolute column. Oh, very good. And there it is. So my formula is still hard-coded, my cell is still hard-coded. Okay, so this formula is going to be a little bit interesting because we're going to have a situation where if I delete a cell, there's going to be no formula. And that's going to be something we're going to want to deal with a little bit differently. So let's just go ahead and get formula parameterized. we should be able to do something similar here. So now I want the target formula. Okay, now we should see this work with whichever one we were on. Which one were we on, incidentally? Okay, it looks like my formula here isn't really a formula at all. It's just a value, but that will be the formula that comes back. So we should see that it brought that. Yep, there's the 17,822. Let's go ahead and actually make one that's a formula here. I'm just going to come to A1. I'm just going to make this the sum of the two cells below it. Okay, so now A1 is a formula. And let's just pay attention, maybe a little closer attention to what our sub runner is doing, our practice runner is doing here. It is calling record edit, and it is passing the active sheet for the sheet and the active cell. So the reason you're getting something different on your sheet than I am on mine is because your active cell is in a different active cell. So now I put a formula in A1, my active cell is A1, and if I run this, then I should see that formula entered in. Yeah, so looks like I've done it a couple of times, but now I've got the actual formula there, which is A1 plus A3, or A2 plus A3. Now, if we delete the value, that's going to do something a little bit unexpected. So I'm just going to come over here to B1 and delete that value. Let's see what it recorded. That looks pretty good, but it's not. Turns out, in the world of database management, when you don't have a value, there's a very specific way that you say there is no value here. And what did we just put in here? We put in a zero-length string. Now, I wouldn't expect you to have this right on the top of your mind because it's after the midterm, after all. But how many bytes of memory get allocated when I say, give me a string? Even before I put any characters in it, right? The default value for a string is an empty string. But how many bytes get allocated? Yeah, 4 is right. There's 4 bytes of overhead for a string. The first 4 bytes of a string tell me how long the string is. And so a string variable that has no data in it still has information, right? The information part of that is that it says, hey, this is a string with no characters. And that takes memory to do. And so what we've done by putting that empty string here is we've put a value. The database sees this as a string value the way any of these others are string values. It's just an unusual set of characters. What's the set of characters that we have in this string? 17822. What's the set of characters we have in this? It's the empty set. Is that a valid set? Like, go back to your 4th grade class where you first drew Venn diagrams. Is there such a set as the empty set? Yeah, that really is a set. And that's what we have here. We've got a set of characters. Well, maybe it's not a set because the order does matter, but there's nothing in it. And that is different than saying there's no value. The way that we say there's no value is with a particular keyword. What's that? It's not is nothing. That's similar in VBA. That's saying it's an object that's not defined. Kind of a similar thing. It's a lot like nothing. It's a lot like nothing at all. But it takes us something to be able to express that. And it turns out the keyword that you use in structured query language to say there's the absence of a value is actually the same one that you use in VBA. We haven't ever looked at this. Let's just take a peek at it right now. So there is an expression called null. Null means there is no value. Actually, it means one of two things in the world of database management. It means either there is no value, meaning, and that's really what we have in this case here, is we're saying, yeah, there's no formula. There is no formula for this. Or it means if there is a value, we don't know what it is. And if there was ever a mistake that was made in the way that we think about databases, this is it, kind of fundamentally. Because null, when I see a null value in a database, I do not know what it means. It could mean there's no value, or it could mean we don't know the value. How it would be nice if we had a way to distinguish that. And we actually first tried to do this in the 1970s. Like there were proposals to say, you know what, we had to have two kind of null values, but they never caught on. And so null means one of those two things. So it's actually used in Visual Basic as well. So there's actually a function called isNull that you can ask, is that the null value? Now I'm actually giving it null. So what do you think? Is that going to be true or false? Should be true. The truth is I don't remember what isNull does with a zero length string. It might say true here. I hope it doesn't. I hope it says false. Oh, good. Whew. So it's telling us that's a zero length string. That's not null. That is some value. It's a string with no characters in it. It's different than null. And it's the same word. It's the same keyword that we use in structured query language. So I got to get null into here. So let's do this. In fact, I think what I want to do is I want to say if that formula does not start with an equal sign, it's not a formula at all. I don't want to show it. There's no formula. There's a value. There's no formula. Okay. So let's do this. Let's say if, and I want to look at the formula of my target. So let's do this. Let's say if the left of my formula, I want to look at just one character on the left of the formula. If that is equal to an equal sign, then I got a formula. Otherwise, I don't. Now, the trouble is, if this formula is a zero length string, what is this left going to evaluate to? If I come here and say, I want to print the leftmost one character, and by the way, there are no characters, what do you think? Take a guess. Zero length string. I would have guessed there was an error. So this is okay. The point is, whatever that is, it's not going to be equal. So if there is an equal sign, we replace it with a formula. If there's not, what should we do? Let's put the word null in there. Now, there's a couple tempting things to do here that are just wrong. That's legal syntax. What does that replace it with? In the string, what does that replace it with? Yeah, it says, oh, actually, let's see if that's even legal. I'm going to put a breakpoint here. And let me go ahead and run this code. Yeah, it doesn't even like that. It's not going to let me, it's not a string, so I can't really just concatenate that in there. I wonder if I can convert it to a string. Can't even convert it to a string. So what I'm trying to do is, in this case, I'm trying to put the absence of a value into this string. It doesn't like it. But that's not what I want anyway, because I need that keyword NULL to be sent to the database, so the database can process it. I don't want to do anything with the keyword null in VBA world. I want 4 characters to go into that value. And so I'll just replace it with null like this. Now that's going to execute okay, but it's not going to give us what we want. Go ahead and run this code again. So we can see that it has put null there into my query string. Let's go ahead and run it through. And then go look at the data that it put in here. It actually wrote the word NULL in here, which, by the way, is that the absence of a value? No, That's a value. It's 4 characters, capital N, little l, little u, little l, little l. Why did it do that? Go ahead. Yeah, that's right. I've got these quotes around it. Right? I told this is a string with 4 characters in it. What I really want this to be is the keyword null. I want that to be NULL, not with quotes around it. So I've got a couple of approaches. Any suggestions on what we should do here? So what you're saying is we've got the single quotes out here, that when we're doing the null one, let's just include that in what we're replacing. Those quotes squished so close together with this font. I'm going to highlight it so you can see it. So inside my quotes, now I'm saying, now in this case, I want to replace formula and the quotes with the word null. Let's just go ahead and run that and see what it gives us. Now it's given me really what I'm after. Now, in some database management systems, they will treat a 0-length string the same as null. Or for instance, Oracle, kind of the earliest one, does that. The truth is, I don't remember if Access does or not. Let's take a look real quick. Let me come to create a query in design view. I'm just going to go into SQL, select star from, I know that's tiny, select star from work log, where formula is null. That's going to give us either 1 or 2 records. It gives us just the 1. It looks like 2 here because this is saying, hey, there's an empty record here. But it only gave us that 1 that actually has the keyword null in it. So it sees that 0-length string as a value. Okay. There's one more thing that we kind of have to tackle here. Let's say I'm going to put a formula in, put a particular formula here into B5. I'm going to say, we're going to make this the, in honor of St. Patrick's Day, which is tomorrow. Let's just turn whatever the last name is into the Irish equivalent. So I'm going to make this equal to, and I am going to concatenate on an O with an apostrophe. I'll concatenate that onto whatever the person's last name is. So instead of Jameson, this is going to be O. Jameson. Oh, and I tried to execute that. Stop. So let me, I'm just going to, while I'm working on this, let me put an exit sub here. Okay, so we've got O. Jameson, O. Darnell, O. Little, O. Newton, O. Allen, O. Hugh, O. whatever. All right, so now, and that single quote is in the formula. Let me get rid of my exit sub here. Let me come back and come here onto O. Allen and run my code. Let me clear up my immediate window so that I've got a clean view of what I'm actually looking at the problem. Okay, so it prints out okay, but it fails when it tries to execute that query. I'm going to bring the values down here so I can just kind of see this whole query in my immediate window. Can you see what the problem is? All right, so here's my formula. Looks pretty good. It just says put an O with a single quote, concatenate that onto H5. Why is it failing? It's failing because of that formula. Why? Okay, so as we're moving along here, we've got to think about what that a query interpreter is going to do in Access. Insert into work log. It looks at this and it goes insert. Oh, I got it. This is the insert statement. I know exactly what you're doing. You know what? I'm expecting the next word to be into. Oh, yep, there it is, into. Now I'm expecting the next word to be name of some table. It looks at that and it says, is that a table? And it goes and looks up the list of tables and goes, yep, that's a table. That's what it's supposed to be. You know what I'm expecting next? An opening parenthesis. Great, just what I was after. What's next? I'm expecting the name of one of the columns in that table. It gets to that and it looks, is that a name of the column in the table? Yeah, it's figuring this out step by step. Pop, 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 pop. It gets down to here and it goes values. Okay, great. Now we're going to be putting the values that go into that list. Opening parenthesis, what I'm expecting. Ah, single quote. This is a string literal. Great. I'm going to keep going until I find the single quote and I'll go, all right, that's the string literal. I'm actually going to be putting Gov Allen into that cell. Because I understand that. And the next thing I'm expecting is a comma. Perfect. Now, oh, another one. I'm not necessarily expecting a quote. Could be something else here. But once it's a quote, I go, all right, yeah, this is a string literal. Got it. There's the end of the string literal. I know what we're talking about. Ultimately, we're going to get to this one, and it's going to say string literal. Got it. I know I'm expecting to go until I find a single quote, which it finds right there. And it says, you are trying to insert equal quote O into that cell. What is the next thing it's expecting after that single quote? It's expecting a comma or the closing parenthesis. And instead, it finds a quote. And it goes, quote. Let's see, I was expecting a comma or a closing parenthesis. That's it. There's nothing else it was expecting there. And it got a quote. And it goes, I have no idea what you're talking about. In fact, what is the error? Syntax error in string in query expression. And it gives us kind of from where that starts up until the end of the thing. So it's kind of nice. It narrowed it down for us. It's saying the error is somewhere in here, but it's that it gets confused by. Whew. Incidentally, you're going to have to deal with a university when you're recording the crime data with St. Mary's University, which has an apostrophe in the name. So you've got to deal with this. So how are we going to get rid of, how are we going to fix that problem? Well, we have a similar problem over here in VBA. Let's say I actually wanted to print you look marvelous. And how did Billy Crystal used to say marvelous? M-A, marvelous, H-A-R-E-L-O-U-S. Okay. Now, I want to put that in quotes. So let me go put that in single quotes first. And that looks great. You look marvelous. I don't want single quotes. I want double quotes. How do I put a, and I have exactly the same problem here, right? If I change that to a double quote, the VBA interpreter is going to see that double quote and it's going to go, great, end of the string. What is this? Oh, actually, it tries to figure it out, but it doesn't do what I'm after. So how am I going to put a double quote into a double quote terminated string? I heard it. Say it. That's right. It's a really interesting thing, and it seems a little crazy to me, but we would do this. The way it actually interprets it, it says, okay, double quote, I got it. String literal. I'm expecting a character, boom, 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 character. Oh, double quote. And it says, I think this is the end of the quote. But wait a minute. Let me look at the very next character. And if the very next character is another double quote, that's not the end of the string. That's actually just a double quote in the string. And so it goes, oh, that's still in the string. Goes still in the string, 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 gets to that one, and it goes, I think that's the end of the string, but wait, let me check to see if it's the end of the string. I mean, if there's another double quote, and it goes, yep, another double quote. So that's just a string in the, that's just a quote. This together is just a quote in the string. This one might give me an error. Let's see. Oh, no, that doesn't. We tried that one. How many quotes do I have? I'm actually aghast that that worked, because I should need to have one more on that. Because that right there is a single quote, is a double quote in the string, and that is the termination of the string. And again, that's just kind of the philosophy of VBA, trying to figure out what I meant. But syntactically, that's what it's supposed to be. And so as it turns out, I need to do the same thing for structured query language. If I want to have a single quote inside a single quote terminated string, I just need to put two single quotes side by side. So in this case, where I'm actually putting the formula in, instead of just dropping the formula, I can just put a replace on this one. Now, I could do this as a separate variable, so I have two different lines of doing the replace, but I can do it right here. It gets a little bit convoluted, but it's not too bad. It's only one nesting level. So I'm going to say replace, look at that target formula. I'm going to replace, I'm going to look for something, and then I'm going to replace it with something, and then close the parenthesis. Okay, so what am I looking for? I'm looking for a single quote, and I'm replacing it with two single quotes. Is that confusing? That's confusing. Let's do it this way instead. I'm going to look for the ASCII value of a single quote, which is 39, which means if I print off character number 39, that'll be a single quote. So I can look for character 39 and replace it with character 39 twice. By the way, which way do you like better? With character 39 as identifying what the single quote is? Who says, yeah, I like this better? Who says, you know what, just put the quote instead of double quotes. We're feeling good about it. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is more readable, especially in my font. If you have the default font that has mono spacing, those are a little more clearly defined as single quotes. Okay, so now I should be able to run that. And it should run okay. Let's just check and make sure the data went in the way we think it should go in. And yeah, there it is. Can I zoom in on this? I don't think I can zoom in on access. But anyway, there's the single quote inside the quotes. Whew. What else are you going to deal with? We've talked about null. We've talked about the other gotcha, which is a single quote. You'll have to deal with both of those in the project. I think that's it. Any questions? Well, I guess we have one more that we haven't done yet. Let's at least finish the example. And so for 100, I'm going to put in my value. And I probably have something similar for this because this could be empty. So let's do this one. We're going to do this one similar. We got to figure out what the if condition is here, but let's look for value. And instead of replacing it with the formula, let's replace it with the value. Now, can my value have a single quote in it? Yeah, so I better leave the same thing on here. Oh, by the way, could my worksheet have a single quote in it? My worksheet name, my workbook name? I think single quotes are allowed in both of those. So I probably should do this same trick on all the things that I could be inserting. We'll leave that off for now. But now, how do we decide if we want to put in null or if we want to put in the actual value here? It's not if the formula has an equal sign. Just do the length of that target dot value. If the length of that is greater than 0, then we'll want to actually insert the value, otherwise we'll insert null. All right. I'm going to go ahead and run my test code. I think I'm on a cell that actually has a single quote in it, so we can see if that worked. Yeah, it got O. Allen then in there. You go ahead and delete a cell. See if that worked. Yeah, that goes in with blank values there. All right. So we've seen, kind of the main gotchas in terms of working with the structured query language from VBA. And at no extra charge, we've seen how can we deal with events happening in the workbook itself. And this is actually kind of a slick little thing. You can kind of snoop around on someone, see exactly what they're doing while they're actually working on Excel. Okay, if there are no other questions, thank you for coming. Class dismissed.